really strong message to the country that work is good for you, work will help not only you, your family, but also the country, as I said earlier. So this focus on lifelong earning, focus on employability, making sure that we are getting people work ready into a job, to once they're in a job to be able to transition into a more responsible part of that job or into a new job is the quickest way to feeling sustained and fulfilled. So I look forward to working with the Minister. I believe passionately in what he's trying to do, and also the Secretary of State that I note now in her seat. I'm genuinely ambitious for every single person that I meet, and I think the front bench of the Department for Education are exactly the same. So I wish Godspeed with this bill, and I look forward to making sure it happens.
Yeah. We're now coming to the White House Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Like many in the House, I'm sure I have benefited from training courses and adult education throughout my career. While some of the skills I developed might not have been directly relevant to my employment at the time, they did prove to be incredibly useful later in life. Like the Minister and Secretary of State, I'm therefore a deeply committed believer in the power of lifelong learning, and I want to put my thanks on record to all those who participated in the debate, the honourable members and right honourable members, and I won't perhaps cover all of them in my summing up, but I was particularly interested to hear some of the historical perspectives that were given from a century ago, or maybe 40 years ago. Certainly I do remember Peter Walker from my youth, but that I think gives it some context about just how some of these challenges have been around for quite some time, and how important it is that we collectively should address them. And I just want to pick up a few points. The honourable member for Waveney, who I don't think is back in his place, but he was right to raise the issue of productivity. It's something that I am particularly concerned about in terms of the UK performance, UK economy, and how we've fallen back. It's not a puzzle as far as I'm concerned. I think there are easy ways to resolve this. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we're 20% behind France in terms of our relative productivity. There were also questions that raised about the eligibility and maintenance support, especially for carers, and their concerns, of course, that we share on these benches. I was interested to hear the sort of discussion that's going on between the member for Stroud and Newcastle under Lyme, really about debt. And of course, we do have to put it in the context of the debt being raised to 9,250 for students, and just what an impact that has had. And of course, we're now in a situation where maintenance loans are relatively frozen, which is really frustrating and reducing the breadth and opportunity for people out there, and reducing the access of young people to education. The Right Honourable Member for Worcester pointed out certain queries and asked about the burden that this might fall on the sector, and it was something that I also picked up on, and I think that's a real concern. And the Honourable Member for Twickenham echoed my concerns about the mechanism of this bill, but in fact there was no actual policy within it. But I think she went on to ask if the government would now abolish the ELQ role, and this is one of the many questions I think that we would have been putting to, or will put to the government when it comes to the committee stage. And I thank the contribution from my right honourable friend, the member for Huddersfield, when he raised the issue about individual learning accounts that had been put forward by the Labour government previously, and that actually there were concerns, there were difficulties with that when it was introduced because of some of the fraud that it led to. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, as I alluded to in my opening speech, the need for lifelong learning is greater than ever. We've been on a slippery slope of economic decline for far too long, with UK GDP per capita growing at an average annual rate of 0.5% in real terms between 2010 and 2021, according to the World Bank. The Labour Party is resolute in its determination to reverse this trend, so much so it is one of our guiding national missions, and in that vein we are prepared to support the Minister throughout the passage of this bill, assuming we see fuller detail in due course. But as I said in my opening remarks, there remain too many gaps, far too many questions, far too many uncertainties at this critical stage. What we have is a frame with the real work yet to be done. In essence, it is a promise, not an empty promise, but a promise that needs substantiating. So there are many questions that have been asked this afternoon. We've had questions over the fee setting, for modules, for courses, questions over quality, concerns over what this government is planning in terms of how that will be determined, the fee determination, the quality, and particularly the concerns over what role precisely will OFS have within this. Many of these would be resolved if the Minister would be prepared to finally publish the LLE consultation response. And there were many questions I raised in my opening remarks that I very much look forward to hearing from the Minister shortly on. But if I could end on one lasting message, it would be this, and that is, please do publish the response to that consultation as a matter of urgency. Madam Deputy Speaker, I look forward to working with the Minister to flesh out the most skeletal of bills, and I hope that we can work constructively in future.
Minister Robert Health.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I start by thanking the shadow spokesman for the very constructive way in which he has approached this bill, and the shadow spokesman for the Liberal Democrats as well. I knew Gordon Marsden well. He was my opposite number when I last had this post a few years ago, and he's a very good man and knows this subject inside out. My honourable friend talks about the consultation. We've said we will publish the consultation before report stage. He will know that the consultation isn't specifically aligned to the measures in this bill. It's about the wider policy of the LLE, and he wants us to introduce the LLE at speed, and that is exactly what we're trying to do, but we want to do it carefully and to make sure that we responded to the consultation following all the submissions that we had in. So, as I say, it will be published by report stage, if not before. He's talked about fee limits. He will know that the Higher Education Act, of course.
Just in terms of, because he's a decent individual, that I would just ask that with the response, that we do get sufficient time to consider that ahead of the committee stage, given it has been it's 10 months really since the consultation.
As I repeat, the consultation will be definitely ready by report stage, and if not before, but I can guarantee to him that it will be ready by report stage. Now, he talked about fee limits. He will know that in the Higher Education Act, the Secretary of State was able to set fee limits from that Act. The Skills Bill built on that which was passed in 2022 as an Act, which allowed for flexible and modular learning. They have the long roots in the ALGA report as well, so the government clearly set direction of travel. And we will be having regular consultation with stakeholders as well. He and the member for Twickenham asked about the hourly value of credit on the face of the bill. The government feels that the number of learning hours in a credit is an area that should continue to be governed from a quality standards perspective rather than the fee limits perspective, and has legislated accordingly. And in the bill, the credits are used to signify the total amount of learning time that a student would ordinarily be expected to spend in order to complete a particular course or part of a course. But further details, I can assure both spokesmen and spokespeople, will be on the number of learning hours associated with credit will be set out in the regulations. However, where providers choose not to use credits in this way for certain courses, these courses will have the fee limit determined using a default credit value, and will face no penalty or reduction in the overall as a result of this. If I could just turn to my successor as chair of the Education Select Committee, the member for Worcester. He spoke quite interestingly about his father. I read a book about his father. He was a very good man. And he talks about the burden of regulation. Our intention is to simplify regulation, not to add to it. Of course, those institutions that offer the LLE will be registered with the OFS. He talked about partnerships with further education and higher education. Absolutely. I think this will rocket boost that, and there are already examples of it. If I can give him the example of Nottingham, Trent University and Mansfield College, for example, which are great examples. And as I repeat, the consultation will be ready by a report stage. If I just want to, the member for Twickenham, I've answered some of her questions as well. On the equivalent learner qualification, I can only say that we'll be able to tell you when the consultation has been published. But I'm hoping she will not be unhappy with that. She made a very, I appreciate her support on this, and again, on maintenance, I envisage a similar system to what exists now for the current student loan system, but the full details will be in the consultation on that. The member for Waveney made a very important speech and is passionate about further education and championing further education. He's absolutely right about employer investment. That's why we introduced the apprenticeship levy, which is not part of this bill and is separate, but is very important, so that we would have business investment in skills. He talks about the disadvantages. He's absolutely right, because they will be able to do modules of flexible learning, and they will have much more access to courses than they would have otherwise wanted to do. One of the reasons for the decline in part-time learning is the 3-year loan. They will be able to do short courses or modules of courses. And the other course. Oh, sorry, I thought somebody was asking me to give way. Just the member for Lichfield being very, very noisy, as usual. I used to work for him many years ago, so I can say that. We're hoping that it will be published in the consultation, but the LLE will, as has been highlighted, will concentrate on levels 4 to 6, and will have a phased approach. The member for Newcastle talked powerfully about this and about good outcomes for students. Of course, I'll meet with his new college group, and business level, local business involvement qualifications. That's entirely why we have the local skills improvement plans. The member for Wantage made a brilliant speech, as is often our want. He will know we've introduced UCAS for apprenticeships and hope to expand that over the coming months and years. He's right, it shouldn't have just been university. It should have been skills. I'm delighted, as I say, by the positive response to this bill. Universities UK have said that it is a welcome step and a more flexible system with opportunity at its heart. And I want to thank all the members who've spoken today. As my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, mentioned earlier, this bill is a major step forward in our mission to revolutionise access to post-18 education and skills through the introduction of the lifelong loan entitlement. I do just want to answer one point, an additional point about the number of adult learners, which has increased to 4.3% from 2021-22 to 2022 to 23, and you will know that many adults are now doing apprenticeships and different kind of adult learning skills. The bill just has 3 clauses, but in supporting of the LLE, it will transform lives. It will transform the lives of working people on low incomes. It will transform the lives of carers who need to balance their commitments alongside study. It will transform the lives of anyone who wants to upskill in their existing career or propel themselves into a new one. The LLE will enable access to modules and courses in a way that hasn't been possible before. It will provide individuals with a loan entitlement to the equivalent of 4 years of post-18 education to use over their working life. Regardless of background, income or circumstance, people have access to a flexi travel card to jump on and off their learning, as opposed to being confined to a single advance ticket. This isn't just a train journey, though, it's a life journey. The Lifelong Learning Higher Education Fee Limits Bill brings in the next piece of legislation to support delivery of the LLE from 2025. As my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, set out earlier, the bill has 3 core elements. It will enable limits for tuition fees to be based on credits. Currently, tuition fees are set for complete years of full courses only. This change means that short courses and modules will be priced appropriately in comparison to and alongside longer courses, for example, degree programmes. Second, as was highlighted by the member for Wantage, this bill introduces the concept of a course year. Currently, tuition fee limits are based on academic years of study. This change will allow fee limits to be applied more accurately to courses which are not aligned with traditional academic years. And finally, this bill allows for an overall maximum chargeable of credits for each type of course. Currently, a maximum can only be set in relation to an academic year. This will prevent students being charged excessively for their studies. In sum, the bill will lay the groundwork to ensure that fee limits are the same for a learner who completes a qualification by studying each individual module at their own pace, as it would be for them to study a typical full-time course across 3 academic years. I will, of course.
What the Minister's winding up successfully, would he agree that this is transformational, that this is going to make people's lives better and the opportunities so much greater, that they can actually change career, change their skills, develop their talents right the way through their working lives?
My honourable friend for Bexley is absolutely right, and he made a brilliant speech, and he is right, and we will be resourcing this in a way that my honourable friend for Stroud wanted, in terms of our extra spending on skills and further education colleges, and I thank her also for her important speech. I just want to continue just to answer. Just one second. I just want to answer some other questions that that the honourable gentleman, the spokesman, asked. Just to be clear, as part of the pathway towards the LLE, the government will stimulate the provision of high-quality technical education level 4 and 5 through the HE short course trial, which he talked about. That's 22 providers.
Order. Could I just ask members to be quiet, because we can't hear what the Minister's saying, and he is not able to see which interventions are coming. So, Minister.
On the student finance system, we'll keep the student finance system under review to ensure it's delivering value for money for both students and taxpayer. The forecast costs, which he asked about for the LE, will be outlined at a future spending review. He asked about the QAA. The QAA released a public statement in July 2022 requesting to step down from their position as the designated quality body, and we're currently consulting on the de-designation of the QAA as required by HERA 2017. That consultation closes on the 3rd of March, which I think, of course.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm hugely grateful to my right honourable friend for giving way. Now, clearly, this is a devolved area of policy in the nations of the UK. What discussions has my right honourable friend had with the devolved administrations? Because clearly, students from all parts of the UK cross-border quite frequently. There will be implications. There will be implications in funding, but there will be an implication in a whole range of issues affecting those implicated by this bill.
My right honourable friend makes an important point, and we will have further be able to explain to him further once the publication of the consultation paper has been published before the report stage of the bill. Of course.
On that point, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend. He will know that the difference between report stage and committee stage can often be a few days. Sometimes in this House it can even be a few hours. But he will, I'm sure, recognise that it would benefit this House enormously in its scrutiny if members could have sight of the government's response to the consultation ahead of the committee stage, when we'll be debating the detail of the bill. I know he can't make that commitment right now, and I appreciate the commitment he's already made to bring it forward by report stage, but will he give every consideration to whether it could be brought forward any faster in the process of this bill, so that this House can give this bill the most effective and positive scrutiny to what I think we've all heard today is a good idea in principle?
Yeah, of course.
Order. Once again, can I just say there are some clearly very important interventions being made. I'm sure honourable and right honourable members want to hear those interventions and want to hear the answers as well. So I would urge all colleagues to listen to the remaining bits of this debate, even though there's obviously an important statement coming. We do want to hear the answers and the interventions. Minister.
Of course, I will consider the representations of my honourable friend and others across this House, and we will try and get the consultation out speedily. But as I say, it will be published by report stage.
Grateful to my right honourable friend for giving way. Does he agree with me that as we look to educate people in perhaps middle age into new skills and to improve their higher education for the future, that it would be good to ensure that we get the sort of skills that we need as a country, and that we have a form of workforce planning, so that, as we know, we're short of doctors and nurses, but there are other areas like welders, life sciences and so on, where we have great hopes and needs for future industry. And does he think there's any way of directing this sort of effort in a more planned way?
That's exactly what the government's programme is doing. We are investing in employer-led qualifications. That's exactly what this is about, and the LLE will enable many millions more people be able to have access to get on the skills ladder of opportunity. Of course.
Dina, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As we look to retrain in later life, can we look to make sure that our armed forces have the support that they need after serving their king, queen and country, when they possibly need to retrain after they leave the armed forces?
Yeah. Well, the beauty of this bill, say to my right honourable friend, is that it will enable anyone to retrain and be able to do long courses, short courses or modules of courses at a time of their own choosing, and building up credits along the way. So the armed forces will be able, who leave the army will be able to do those kind of retraining skilled. Okay, for the last time.
I thank the Minister for giving way. Does the Minister agree with me that not only will this legislation and government support, but the £6.6 million of investment in Cadbury College in Kings Norton in my constituency will make sure that people will have the facilities and the resources, make sure we're giving people the skills they need for later on in life?
Order. Well, once again, it is getting very noisy, and we're not able to hear the answers from the Minister. So I would urge colleagues to listen to the answers that the Minister is giving. Minister. Michael Fabricant.
Thank you. I just wonder whether the Deputy Speaker could make an inquiry as to whether the loudspeakers are turned up. Because although there is some noise in the chamber, it's actually rather quiet coming out of the speakers in our benches.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for that point of order. I think it would be helped, the situation would be helped, and I can still hear a lot of noise even when I'm speaking. So I would urge colleagues to keep the level of noise, and then we will be able to hear what the Minister is saying. Minister.
Hey, to my honourable friend, I absolutely agree, and he's hit the nail on the head. And just on terms of the point of order, it's never quiet when the honourable member is in the House of Commons. Never quiet. Just to follow up with one of the questions from the Liberal Democrat spokesman, in terms of the student loan repayment mechanism work compared to now. So we are building the LLE on a proven system, consciously designed to both support students pursuing higher education and share the cost fairly with the taxpayer. As the current student loan system, repayments will be linked to income, not interest rates or the amounts borrowed. So in the few minutes that remain, I'm grateful to members for their contributions today, and I hope to have addressed as many points as possible. I want to conclude by reiterating the significance of this bill. The bill's a further piece of the jigsaw of the transformative reforms that will improve our skills system and revolutionise how and when people can and do access study. And this sentiment is echoed by the sector. Professor Tom Buick of the Federation of Awarding Bodies emphasising the potential of the bill to be the most radical entitlement to adult education, skills training and retraining delivered at the point of need ever introduced. These reforms are a step forward, providing everyone with a ladder of opportunity to get the skills, security and prosperity that they need. The government's not only expanding high-quality opportunities, the rungs of this ladder, which encompasses careers, quality qualifications, skills and lifelong learning, we are also, through this bill and the LLE, building the top rung of the ladder, social justice, through expanding access to quality lifelong educational opportunities, which for the most disadvantaged pupils will mean levelling up productivity and employment by improving the skills pipeline and supporting people into fulfilling lasting careers. I know you will join me in supporting this greater flexibility to our post-18 education and skills system, removing barriers to ensure everyone is empowered to access further and higher education when and how it suits them. The bill will promote equality in access to education, whether students are undertaking a degree or module of a degree. I commend the bill to the House.
The question is that the bill be now read the second time. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to the programme motion for the Lifelong Learning Higher Education Fee Limits Bill. Programme motion to be moved formally. The question is, as on the order paper, as many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to the money resolution in respect of the Powers of Attorney Bill. Minister to move the motion. The question is, as on the order paper. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order.
What do we do now? Motions? Right, we've got two motions. I'll take them separately. Motion number 4, Minister to move.
I beg to move.
All in favour?
Aye.
The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to number 5, telecommunications. Minister to move.
I beg to move.
Questions as on the order paper. As many that opinion say aye.
Aye.
The contrary, no. The ayes have it. I'll have to take that vote again. As many that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Right. We now come to the statement. I call on the Prime Minister to move the statement. Rishi Sunak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I begin, I know the whole House will join me in paying tribute to Betty Boothroyd, who passed away yesterday. She was a remarkable woman who commanded huge admiration and respect as the first female Speaker of this House. She was as firm as she was fair, and she presided over many historic moments in this House, among them the debates on the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. Her passion, wit and immeasurable contribution to our democracy will never be forgotten. And Mr. Speaker, let us also send our very best wishes to Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell and his family. He is a man of immense courage who both on and off duty has devoted himself to the service of others. this House stands united with the people and leaders of all communities across Northern Ireland in condemning those who are trying to drag us back to the past. They will never succeed. With permission, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a statement on the Northern Ireland Protocol. After weeks of negotiations today, we have made a decisive breakthrough. The Windsor Framework delivers free-flowing trade within the whole United Kingdom. It protects Northern Ireland's place in our union, and it safeguards sovereignty for the people of Northern Ireland. By achieving all this, it preserves the delicate balance inherent in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. And, Mr. Speaker, it does what many said could not be done, removing thousands of pages of EU laws and making permanent, legally binding changes to the Protocol Treaty itself. That is the breakthrough we have made. Those are the changes we will deliver, and now is the time to move forward as one United Kingdom. Mr. Speaker, before I turn to the details, let us remind ourselves why this matters. It matters because at the heart of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, and the reason it's endured for a quarter of a century, is equal respect for the aspirations and identities of all communities and all its three strands. But the Northern Ireland Protocol has undermined that balance. How can we say the Protocol protects the Belfast Good Friday Agreement when it has caused the institutions of that agreement to collapse? So, in line with our legal responsibilities, we are acting today to preserve the balance of that agreement and chart a new way forward for Northern Ireland. I pay tribute to our European friends for recognising the need for change, particularly President von der Leyen, my predecessors for laying the groundwork for today's agreement, and my right honourable friends, the Foreign and Northern Ireland Secretaries, for their perseverance in finally persuading the EU to do what it spent years refusing to do, to rewrite the treaty and replace it with a radical, legally binding new framework. Today's agreement has three equally important objectives. First, allowing trade to flow freely within our UK internal market. Second, protecting Northern Ireland's place in our union. And third, safeguarding sovereignty and closing the democratic deficit. Let me take each in turn. Mr. Speaker, core to the problems with the protocol was that it treated goods moving from Great Britain to Northern Ireland as if they were crossing an international customs border. This created extra costs and paperwork for businesses who had to fill out complex customs declarations. It limited choice for the people of Northern Ireland, and it undermined the UK internal market, a matter of identity as well as economics. Today's agreement removes any sense of a border in the Irish Sea and ensures the free flow of trade within the UK. We have secured a key negotiating objective: the introduction of a new green lane for goods destined for Northern Ireland, with a separate red lane for those going to the EU. Within the green lane, burdensome customs bureaucracy will be scrapped and replaced with data sharing of ordinary existing commercial information. Routine checks and tests will also be scrapped. The only checks will be those required to stop smugglers and criminals. And our new green lane will be open to a broad, comprehensive range of businesses across the United Kingdom. I'm pleased to say we have also permanently protected tariff-free movement of all types of steel into Northern Ireland. And for goods going the other way, from Northern Ireland to Great Britain, we have scrapped export declarations, delivering finally completely unfettered trade. And, Mr. Speaker, the commitment to establish the green lane is achieved by a legally binding amendment to the text of the treaty itself. This is fundamental, far-reaching change, and it permanently removes the border in the Irish Sea. Mr. Speaker, perhaps the single most important area of trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland is food. 3/4 of the food in Northern Ireland's supermarkets comes from the rest of the UK. Yet the protocol applied the same burdens on shipments from Cairn Ryan to Larne as between Holyhead and Dublin. If it was implemented in full, we would see supermarket lorries needing hundreds of certificates for every individual item, every single document checked, supermarket staples like sausages banned altogether, more delays, more cost, less choice. So today's agreement fixes all this with a new, permanent, legally abiding approach to food. We will expand the green lane to food retailers, and not just supermarkets, but wholesalers and hospitality too. Instead of hundreds of certificates, lorries will make one simple digital declaration to confirm that goods will remain in Northern Ireland. Visual inspections will be cut from 100% now to just 5%. Physical checks and tests will be scrapped unless we suspect fraud, smuggling or disease. And so there will be no need for vets in warehouses. Of course, to deliver this, we need to reassure the EU that food imports won't be taken into Ireland. So we will ask retailers to mark a small number of particularly high-risk food products as not for EU, with a phased rollout of this requirement to give them the time to adjust. And more fundamentally, we have delivered a form of dual regulation for food, the single biggest sector by far for East-West trade and one of the most important in people's lives. Under the protocol, retail food products made to UK standards could not be sold in Northern Ireland. Today's agreement completely changes that. This means the ban on British products like sausages entering Northern Ireland has now been scrapped. If it's available on supermarket shelves in Great Britain, then it will be available in supermarket shelves in Northern Ireland. We will still need to make sure that goods moved into Northern Ireland don't risk bringing in animal and plant diseases, but that's clearly a common sense measure, never opposed by anyone, to prevent diseases circulating within the long-standing single epidemiological zone on the island of Ireland. And Mr. Speaker, that brings me to the treatment of parcels. If the protocol was fully implemented, every single parcel travelling between Great Britain and Northern Ireland will be subject to full international customs. You'd have needed a long, complex form to send every single parcel, even a birthday present, for a niece or nephew. And you could have only shopped online from retailers willing to deal with all that bureaucracy, with some already pulling out of Northern Ireland. Today's agreement fixes all of this. It achieves something we've never achieved before, removing requirements of the EU Customs Code for people sending and receiving parcels. Families can rightly send packages to each other without filling in forms. Online retailers can serve customers in Northern Ireland as they did before, and businesses can ship parcels through the green lane, all underpinned by data sharing by parcel operators with a phased rollout and time for them to adjust. So, Mr. Speaker, no burdensome customs bureaucracy, no routine checks, bans on food products scrapped, steel tariff rate quotas fixed, tariff reimbursement scheme approved, vet inspections gone, export declarations gone, parcels paperwork gone. We have delivered what the people of Northern Ireland asked for and the command paper promised. We have removed the border in the Irish Sea. But Mr. Speaker, to preserve the balance of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, we also need to protect Northern Ireland's place in our union. The Windsor Framework is about making sure that Northern Ireland gets the full benefit of being part of the United Kingdom in every respect. Under the protocol, in too many ways, that simply wasn't the case. Take tax. When I was Chancellor, it frustrated me that when I cut VAT on solar panels or beer duty in pubs, those tax cuts didn't apply in Northern Ireland. Now we've amended the legal text of the treaty so that critical VAT and excise changes will apply to the whole of the United Kingdom. This means 0 rates of VAT on energy-saving materials will now apply in Northern Ireland. Reforms to alcohol duty to cut the cost of a pint in pubs will now apply in Northern Ireland. But because we now have control over VAT policy, we can make sure that the EU's plan to reduce the VAT threshold by £10,000 will not apply in Northern Ireland, and nor will the SME VAT directive that would have brought huge amounts of EU red tape for small businesses. We're also making subsidy control provisions work as intended. Already, just 2% of subsidy measures in Northern Ireland fall within the scope of the EU approvals under the protocol. Nevertheless, today's agreement goes further, addressing the so-called reach-back of EU state aid law. It does this by imposing stringent new tests. For the EU to argue we're in breach of their rules, they'd now have to demonstrate that there is a real, genuine and material impact on Northern Ireland's trade with the EU. That is a much higher threshold than the protocol, limiting disputes to what the 2021 command paper called subsidies on a significant scale relating directly to Northern Ireland. We've also protected the special status of agriculture and fisheries subsidies in Northern Ireland, which will be completely outside the EU's common agricultural policy. All of which means the problem of reach-back is fixed. As well as tax and spend, the UK government has a responsibility to protect the supply of medicines to all its citizens. Our ability to do that was constrained by the protocol. The biggest problem is that drugs approved for use by the UK's medicines regulator are not automatically available in Northern Ireland. Imagine someone suffering with cancer in Belfast, seeing a potentially life-changing new drug available everywhere else in the UK, but unable to access it at home. And when the current grace period ends in 2024, the situation will get worse still. Expensive and burdensome checks on all medicines. Companies having to manufacture drugs with 2 completely different labels and supply chains. Pharmacies needing to check every package with complex scanners. And when 80% of Northern Ireland's medicines come from Great Britain, those frictions pose a serious risk to the supply of medicines to the people of Northern Ireland. To fix this, today's agreement achieves something unprecedented. It provides dual regulation for medicines. The UK's regulator will approve all drugs for the whole UK market, including Northern Ireland, with no role for the European Medicines Agency. This fully protects the supply of medicines from Great Britain into Northern Ireland and once again asserts the primacy of UK regulation. The same medicines, in the same packs, with the same labels, will be available in every pharmacy and hospital in the United Kingdom. And crucially, dual regulation means that Northern Ireland's world-leading healthcare industry, which brings much-needed jobs and investment, can still trade with both the EU and UK markets. This is a landmark deal for patients in Northern Ireland. It is a permanent solution that brings peace of mind. And Mr. Speaker, the protocol also banned quintessentially British products going to Northern Ireland. When people wanted to import oak trees to mark Her late Majesty's Platinum Jubilee, the protocol stood in their way. It suspended the historic trade in seed potatoes between Scotland and Northern Ireland. And if implemented, it would create massive costs and bureaucracies for people travelling around the UK with their pets, disrupting family life and our family of nations. That's why today's agreement will lift the ban on shrubs, plants and trees going to Northern Ireland. Lift the ban on the movement of seed potatoes, particularly important for Scottish businesses, and we will deliver this by expanding the existing UK plant passport scheme. And when it comes to pets, we have made sure that people from Northern Ireland will have completely free access to travel to Great Britain. And if you're a pet owner travelling from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, just make sure your pet is microchipped, and then all you'll need to do is simply tick a box when booking your travel. So whether it's lower VAT rates, lower beer duty, Jubilee Oaks in garden centres, seamless travel with pets, seamless trade in seed potatoes, or the seamless supply of cutting-edge medicines, All of this now available for everyone, everywhere in the United Kingdom. And Mr. Speaker, the Windsor Framework goes further still, safeguarding sovereignty for the people of Northern Ireland and eliminating the democratic deficit. Fundamentally, the protocol meant the EU could impose new laws on the people of Northern Ireland without them having a say. I know some members of this House, whose voices I deeply respect, say that EU laws should have no role whatsoever in Northern Ireland. I understand that view. I am sympathetic to it. But for as long as the people of Northern Ireland continue to support their businesses having privileged access to the EU market, and if we want to avoid a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, as we all do, then there will be some role for EU law. So the question is, what is the absolute minimum amount necessary to avoid a hard border? Today's agreement scraps 1,700 pages of EU law. The amount of EU law that applies in Northern Ireland is less than 3%. And the people of Northern Ireland retain the right to reject that 3% through next year's consent vote. However, that consent vote is about the whole protocol, so it cannot by its nature provide oversight of individual new laws. And it does not address the number one challenge to sovereignty made by the protocol, the ability of the EU to impose new or amended goods laws on Northern Ireland without them having a say. To address that, today's agreement introduces a new Stormont break. The Stormont break does more than just give Northern Ireland a say over new EU laws. It means they can block them. How will this work? The democratically elected Assembly can oppose new EU goods rules that would have significant and lasting effects on their everyday lives. They will do so on the same basis as the petition of concern mechanism in the Good Friday Agreement, needing the support of 30 members from at least 2 parties. If that happens, the UK government will have a veto. And we will work with the Northern Ireland Assembly and all parties to codify how the UK government will use that veto. And let me tell the House the full significance of this breakthrough. The Stormont break gives the institutions of the Good Friday Agreement a powerful new safeguard. It means the United Kingdom can veto new EU laws if they are not supported by both communities in Northern Ireland. And yes, it is true that until now, the EU had refused to consider treaty change. We were told it was impossible. The EU negotiators would never consider it. But the Stormont break has been introduced by fundamentally rewriting the treaty, specifically the provisions relating to dynamic alignment. That is a permanent change. It ends the automatic ratchet of EU law. And if the veto is used, the European courts can never overturn our decision. And the EU have also explicitly accepted an important principle in the political declaration. It is there in black and white that the treaty is subject to the Vienna Convention. This means that unequivocally the legal basis for the Windsor Framework is in international law. I'd like to thank my right honourable friend, the member for Stone, for his support in negotiating this point. And it puts beyond all doubt that we have now taken back control. Mr. Speaker, from the very start, we have listened closely and carefully to views on all sides of this debate. I'm grateful to many members of this House, the communities of Northern Ireland, and the voices of business and civil society for putting forward their suggestions. I want to particularly thank the Northern Ireland business groups that I have spoken to. I hope in today's agreement they recognise we have addressed their concerns. We are delivering stability, certainty, simplicity, affordability and clarity, as well as strengthened representation for the businesses of Northern Ireland. I also want to speak directly to the unionist community. I understand and have listened to your frustrations and concerns. And I would not be standing here today if I did not believe today's agreement marks a turning point for the people of Northern Ireland. It is clearly in the interests of the people and those of us who are passionate about the cause of unionism for power sharing to return. Of course, parties will want to consider the agreement in detail, a process that will need time and care. And there are, of course, many voices and perspectives within Northern Ireland, and it is a job of government to respect them all. But I have kept the concerns raised by the elected representatives of unionism at the forefront of my mind, because it is their concerns with the protocol that have been so pronounced. And what I can say is this: our goal has been to ensure the economic rights of the people of Northern Ireland under the Act of Union and Belfast Good Friday Agreement, placing them on an equal footing with the rest of the UK with respect to tax, trade and the availability of goods. And we have worked to end the prospect of trade diversion, removed any sense of a border for UK internal trade, removed routine customs or checks for goods destined for Northern Ireland, removed thousands of pages of existing EU law and introduced a UK veto on dynamic alignment through the Stormont break. We have created a form of dual regulation where it works and it is needed most in sectors like medicines and food retail. We have delivered unfettered access to the whole UK market for Northern Ireland's businesses, and we will take further steps to avoid regulatory divergence in future. We've secured a clear EU commitment and process to manage future changes with a special goods body, and all of this means Northern Ireland's businesses have continued access to the EU market as they requested. It means we have protected the letter and the spirit of Northern Ireland's constitutional guarantee in the Belfast Agreement, with the Stormont break creating an effective cross-community safeguard. There are, Mr. Speaker, two distinct economies on the island of Ireland, and that will remain the case. Today's agreement puts beyond all doubt that Northern Ireland's place in the internal market and United Kingdom is fully restored. Mr. Speaker, I want to conclude by directly addressing the question of the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill. As I and my predecessors always said, the bill was only ever meant to be a last resort, meant for a world where we could not get negotiations going. As the government said at the time of introduction, our clear preference remains a negotiated solution. Now that we've persuaded the EU to fundamentally rewrite the treaty text of the protocol, we have a new and better option. The Windsor Framework delivers a decisively better outcome than the bill, achieving what people said could not be done and what the bill does not offer. It permanently removes any sense of a border in the Irish Sea. It gives us control over dynamic alignment through the Stormont break beyond what the bill promised, and the bill did not change a thing in international law, keeping the jurisdiction of the ECJ and leaving us open to months, maybe years of uncertainty, disruption and legal challenge. Today's agreement makes binding legal changes to the treaty itself and is explicitly based in international law. And unlike the bill, it is an agreement that provides certainty, stability and, crucially, can start delivering benefits almost immediately for the people and businesses of Northern Ireland. Of course, the House would expect to be informed of the government's updated legal position on whether there is a lawful basis to proceed with the bill, so I'm publishing it today. It says that because we have achieved a new negotiated agreement which preserves the balance of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, the original and sound justification legally for the bill has now fallen away. In other words, neither do we need the bill, and nor do we have a credible basis to pursue it. As such, we will no longer proceed with the bill, and the European Union will no longer proceed with their legal actions against the UK. Instead, we will pursue the certainty of a new way forward with the Windsor Framework. And let me just remind the House of the full breadth and significance of what we have achieved today. We've achieved free-flowing trade with a green lane for goods, no burdensome customs bureaucracy, no routine checks on trade, no paperwork whatsoever for Northern Irish goods moving into Great Britain, and no border in the Irish Sea. We've protected Northern Ireland's place in the Union, with state aid reach-back fixed, the same tax rules applying everywhere, vet certificates for food lorries gone, the ban on British sausages gone, parcel paperwork gone, pet paperwork gone, garden centres now selling the same trees, supermarkets selling the same food, and pharmacies selling the same medicines. And we've safeguarded sovereignty for the people of Northern Ireland. With the democratic deficit closed, the Vienna Convention confirmed, thousands of pages of EU law scrapped, and with the Stormont break, we have safeguarded democracy and sovereignty for the people of Northern Ireland. So that is the choice before us, Mr. Speaker. Let us seize the opportunity of this moment, the certainty of an agreement that fixes the problems we face, commands broad support and consensus, and offers us at last the freedom to move forward together. That is what the people of Northern Ireland deserve. That is what the Windsor Framework delivers. As a Conservative, a Brexiteer and a Unionist, I believe passionately, with my head and my heart, that this is the right way forward. Right for Northern Ireland, right for our United Kingdom, and I commend it to this House.
Thank you. What I want to do is make sure we get everybody in. This is a very important day. I now call the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Prime Minister for advance sight of his statement and for the briefing I was given earlier this afternoon. I'd like to start by joining the Prime Minister in paying tribute to Betty Boothroyd. As Speaker of this House, she was at the forefront of a generation that smashed the glass ceiling for female politicians. She was an inspirational woman, a dedicated and devoted public servant who will be clearly missed by all who knew her. My thoughts, the thoughts of the whole House, are with her very many friends and family. Mr. Speaker, the Good Friday Agreement and the peace and prosperity it brought to Northern Ireland are amongst the proudest achievements of the last Labour government. But we in Labour have always recognised this achievement does not principally belong to us, but to the people of Northern Ireland, who over a quarter of a century have overcome differences that once seemed insurmountable and shown that they can work together to build a better future for themselves and for the generations to come. I had the privilege of working for a number of years with the Police Service of Northern Ireland, so that it can serve and represent both communities. But it's the police officers themselves who carried out that change. They helped make peace of the Good Friday Agreement stick. So I was deeply saddened by the shooting of DCI John Caldwell. And our thoughts, the thoughts of the whole House, are with him, his family, and with his colleagues. But, Mr. Speaker, DCI Caldwell's shooting is a reminder that we must continue to strive for peace, that we in the House must take our obligations under the Good Friday Agreement and to the people of Northern Ireland as seriously as they do. It is in that spirit that I have been clear for some time that if the Prime Minister were to get an agreement with the EU, and if their agreement is in the interests of this country and Northern Ireland, then Labour would support it. And we will stick to our word. We will not snipe. We will not seek to play political games. And when the Prime Minister puts this deal forward for a vote, Labour will support it and vote for it. The protocol will never be perfect. It's a compromise. But I've always been clear that if implemented correctly, it is an agreement that can work in the spirit of the Good Friday Agreement. And now that it has been agreed, we all have an obligation to make it work. The moral core of the Good Friday Agreement is simple. All people of Northern Ireland have the right to identify themselves and be accepted as Irish or British or both, and freely participating in the economic life of the UK or the Republic of Ireland is an essential part of that. That is why it is good that the deal before us will see fewer unnecessary checks on goods moving between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. The Red and Green Lane proposal is a good one. It will make life easier for business. It will enable the people of Northern Ireland to participate more freely in the economic life of the UK. It has our full support. The protocol will continue to ensure there's no physical border on the island of Ireland. That is essential. We all know that any physical border would be a source of tension, a physical manifestation of new barriers between communities in Northern Ireland and the economic life in the Republic. This agreement will allow us to move forward as a country rather than be locked in endless disputes with our allies. It will improve our diplomatic standing, which has been damaged by the government's previous threats to break international law. And I am encouraged that the DUP has said it will look carefully at the measures that it contains. But we must be honest, this comes with trade-offs. The Right Honourable Member for Uxbridge and South Ruislip told the people of Northern Ireland that his protocol meant no forms, no checks, no barriers of any kind on goods crossing the Irish Sea after Brexit. That was absolute nonsense. A point-blank refusal to engage with unionists in Northern Ireland in good faith, never mind take their concerns seriously. And it inevitably contributed to the collapse of power sharing in Northern Ireland. And I have to say, as the Prime Minister listed all the problems with the protocol, I did rather wonder whether he'd forgotten who negotiated it. So when presenting what this agreement means in practice, and it will take time for everybody to read it and carefully consider it, I urge the Prime Minister to be utterly unlike his predecessor. Do not pretend the deal is something it is not. Where there are trade-offs to be made, argue the case for them. Treat unionists with the respect of frank honesty, not the contempt of bluster. Because in this 25th anniversary year of the Good Friday Agreement, we must once again embrace compromise and put division behind us. This deal is not perfect, but because we recognise that the UK agreed to the protocol and has an obligation to make it work, because we recognise that for the protocol to work, there will inevitably be trade-offs, and because we always recognise that peace and prosperity in Northern Ireland is hard won, Labour will support the Windsor Framework. I hope that in coming days others will come to support the agreement in the same spirit and join Labour in voting to make the protocol work, in voting to face the future, in voting for country before party. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the right honourable gentleman for his comments and support. I agree with him on the substance of what he has said, and I would just say to him that at this moment in time, the right thing for all of us to do is not to look backwards, but to look forwards to the brighter future that we can see for Northern Ireland. He talks of trade-off, and for me, I would talk of balance, and the delicate balance inherent in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. And it's important that we respect the aspirations and identities of all communities. And that's what the protocol had unbalanced, and that's what the Windsor Framework restores. And I do believe, hand on heart, that the changes we have achieved, the framework that we now have in place, will enable balance to be restored to the people of Northern Ireland. It puts them in control of their destiny. It secures their place in the Union. It safeguards their sovereignty. And on that basis, I hope we can look forward to a brighter future for everyone in Northern Ireland.
Theresa May.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I first associate myself with the remarks made both by my right honourable friend and the Leader of the Opposition about Baroness Boothroyd, an outstanding speaker, and DCI John Caldwell. The Northern Ireland Protocol, negotiated and signed by the government in December 2019, adopted the European Union's preferred proposal of a border down the Irish Sea. Can I congratulate my right honourable friend and the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland and the Foreign Secretary and all their teams for all the work they have done to achieve this negotiated settlement, which will make a huge difference. And does my right honourable friend agree with me that the best move now is for everybody across this House to support this settlement, because that is what is in the best interests of all the people of Northern Ireland?
Prime Minister.
Okay, thank my right honourable friend and join her in paying tribute to the Northern Ireland Foreign Secretaries. They deserve enormous credit for the framework that we have achieved today. And can I pay tribute to her for all her work over the years on this topic, where she has kept safeguarding the Union at the top of her mind throughout. And I agree with her. What all of us should have at this moment at the top of our minds is the people of Northern Ireland and what is in their interest. And I hope when people have the time and space to consider the Windsor Framework that they will see that this is the best way to move forward and build that better future in Northern Ireland.
SNP spokesperson Stephen Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think I'm the group leader, but I'll take spokesperson as well. The glass ceilings are there to be broken. Betty Boothroyd didn't just break a glass ceiling, she shattered the glass ceiling, and in that regard she has my utmost respect, and my thoughts and condolences are with her and all of her family members. My thoughts are also with the police officer in Northern Ireland who was so tragically and appallingly shot in recent days. I sincerely hope that he is able to make a recovery, and I join with members across the House in that regard. Mr. Speaker, to the agreement today, you'd be forgiven for thinking on the basis of what the Prime Minister has said and in the Chamber and indeed earlier today that it had absolutely nothing to do with him, that all those problems were nothing to do with the Conservative Party or indeed him as a government minister. So what happened a couple of years ago? Were they simply being opportunistic when they put this in place? Were they incompetent when they put this in place? Or were they simply duped into believing that something was oven ready when quite clearly it was not? I have no doubt that the public will draw their own conclusions in that regard. But broadly speaking, Mr. Speaker, broadly speaking, I'm fully supportive of the agreement. And I'm fully supportive of the agreement for three simple reasons. Three simple and interwoven reasons. It seeks to safeguard peace in Northern Ireland, something which we all know is incredibly important. It seeks to protect the Good Friday Agreement, which is, of course, protect the Good Friday Agreement, which I think everyone in the Chamber would agree is incredibly important. And of course, because it seeks to provide a pathway back to the democratic institutions in Northern Ireland being able to sit. Now, it's not for me to pontificate about democracy in Northern Ireland, but I sincerely hope that those parties involved will be able to come to an agreeable conclusion, and I know the Prime Minister shares my views in that regard. But, Mr. Speaker, whilst all of that is good, we cannot and we should not forget the damage which has been done by leaving the European Union. Brexit has been an unmitigated disaster, and they don't have to believe me, Mr. Speaker, because what they should do is read the OBR, who outlined that there would be a 4% hit to GDP as a result of Brexit. Or perhaps they should reflect upon the fact that the trade deficit between the UK and EU is at its highest level on record. Perhaps they could listen to the private sector, those businesses who are unable to trade those businesses who are unable to get the workforce that they require, those businesses who are unable to get the goods that they need. Or perhaps they could listen to the public sector, who of course are facing severe problems as well, many of them driven by workforce shortages. Indeed, many of the problems which encompass and face all of our NHSs across these Isles come from the fact that we have significant staff shortages in social care. Each and every one of those points, Mr. Speaker, is a result of the disaster that has been leaving the European Union. And I just find it astonishing, Mr. Speaker, that we have a situation where the leader of the Labour Party and the leader of the Conservative Party are hand in glove when it comes to their position on Brexit. But just finally, Mr. Speaker, we heard integrity of the United Kingdom spoken about at length by the Prime Minister. Indeed, I think it was reflected upon by the leader of the opposition as well. But whilst there may be a scintilla of truth within that argument, what this deal does not do is create parity for the nations of these Isles. Because what it allows, and I see the Northern Ireland Minister sitting there who was very positive about this in an interview earlier on, it means that businesses in Northern Ireland have access to the single market, whereas businesses in Scotland do not. Now, I do not begrudge that to the people and businesses of Northern Ireland, but I do regret that Scotland does not have those same opportunities. So on that point, can the Prime Minister just clarify why Scotland is at a significant disadvantage in that regard on his watch? And does he not agree with me that the only way for Scotland to have access to the single market, the only way for Scotland to have access to the customs union, the only way for Scotland to rejoin the European Union is to rid itself of Westminster?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, can I thank the honourable gentleman for his support for the new agreement that we struck today, the Windsor Framework, in particular his acknowledgement of the sovereignty that it provides for the people of Northern Ireland to have a say in their own destiny, something that was asked for and something that has been delivered. He's also right to say that it's not for us, any of us, to opine, and we will give the parties and the communities in Northern Ireland the space and the time they need to consider the detail of the Windsor Framework. And more broadly, Mr. Speaker, without engaging on the broader debate that he raises, I am a passionate unionist, and I will always believe that our union is stronger when we are together, and Scotland will always, alongside Northern Ireland, Wales, be part of what makes this country great, and we will fight day in and day out to protect that union.
And the House to Peter Bottomley.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition helpfully said that people in Northern Ireland might regard themselves as Irish or as British and Irish. I think a large number will also regard themselves just as Northern Irish. I think that from the beginning to the end of this framework, the beginning which says the protocol has been the source of acute political, economic and societal difficulties, to the last sentence which talks about the shared desire for a positive relationship, constituents will say this agreement resolves some of the known problems about the protocol and some of the ones which become obvious since then. It's over 50 years, or about 50 years, since there was last a unionist MP who was a minister in the UK government. I hope this agreement makes it possible that that can happen again.
Well, can I thank the Father of House for his support and his observations. He's right about the agreement that we struck. It resolves the problems that we know about, but it also puts in place structures and mechanisms to resolve anything else that might come down the line, because it's important that there is dialogue, not just with the European Union, but close dialogue with communities and businesses in Northern Ireland, something they have asked for. And as a result of this agreement, they will have new engagement, new ways to make their voices heard, so that we can continue to make sure that we do the best for them and their communities in Northern Ireland.
Sir Geoffrey Donaldson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And could I, on behalf of the Democratic Unionist Party, add our voice in tribute to the late Betty Boothroyd, who was my first speaker, a wonderful woman who brought so much to this House. And could I also add our concern and our sympathy to the family of DCI Caldwell, where he continues to be in our prayers, Mr. Speaker. And I was pleased to stand with the other leaders in Belfast with the Chief Constable on Friday, and to be clear, the people who perpetrated this evil have no place in the future of Northern Ireland. Mr. Speaker, our judgment and principled position in opposing the protocol in Parliament and at Stormont, I believe, has been vindicated. Undoubtedly, it is now recognised that the protocol does not work. And when others said there could be no renegotiation and no change, it was our determination that has proven what can be achieved. And I would like to thank the Prime Minister and his predecessors for their work and engagement to date on this issue. In broad terms, it is clear that significant progress has been secured across a number of areas, whilst also recognising that there remain key issues of concern. There can be no disguising the fact, for example, that in some sectors of our economy in Northern Ireland, EU law remains applicable in our part of the United Kingdom. My party will want to study the detail of what has been published today, as well as examining the legal text, the political declaration and the government's command paper. Where necessary, we stand ready to engage with the government in order to seek further clarification, reworking or change as required. Ultimately, my party will now assess all these proposed outcomes and arrangements against our 7 tests outlined in our 2022 Assembly Election Manifesto to determine whether what has been published meets those tests and whether it respects and restores Northern Ireland's place within the United Kingdom. And in this regard, and finally, Mr. Speaker, I agree with the Prime Minister that the issue of sovereignty is crucial. Article 6 of the Act of Union, the very basis of the Union itself, the economic union of the United Kingdom, was seriously undermined by the Northern Ireland Protocol and its implementation, and that needs to be resolved. Of the £77 billion of goods manufactured in Northern Ireland, £65 billion of that £77 billion are sold within the United Kingdom. The overwhelming majority of what we produce, we sell within our own internal market. And I want an assurance from the Prime Minister that not just now, but in the future, the Government of the United Kingdom will protect Northern Ireland's place within that internal market and will not allow the application of EU law to put barriers in the way of our ability to trade with the rest of our own country.
Mr. Speaker, can I first of all start by thanking the Right Honourable Friend for the constructive engagement that I've had with him and members of his team over recent time. As I said earlier, I've tried very hard to listen in particular to the concerns of the elected representatives of the Unionist community in Northern Ireland, because I know it is them who have had the most concerns with the protocol. And at the forefront of my mind throughout all our negotiations has been resolving the issues that those communities have raised with me and the government that they are grappling with. I believe very strongly that the Windsor Framework does resolve those issues, but I appreciate that the Right Honourable Gentleman and his party and other Unionist communities will want to take the time to consider the detail, and I respect that, and we will give them the time and the space to consider that and stand ready to answer any questions and provide any clarifications. But I also can tell him, with regard to the objectives that he set out and others have set out, that I believe that this agreement, this Windsor Framework, does ensure the free flow of trade within our United Kingdom internal market, including unfettered access for Northern Ireland producers to the rest of the United Kingdom. I do believe it secures Northern Ireland's place in the Union, making sure that citizens and businesses can benefit in the same way everywhere across the United Kingdom. And lastly, and as he has rightly highlighted to me on previous occasions, it ensures and safeguards sovereignty for the people of Northern Ireland so that they are in control of their destiny. I believe that what we have achieved today does provide the basis for parties in Northern Ireland to consider the detail and hopefully move forward so together we can build a better future for Northern Ireland, and I look forward to doing that with him.
Chair of the Select Committee, Simon Hall.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, and his ministerial colleagues have strained every sinew these last weeks and months to arrive at today's position. They are to be congratulated. And, Mr. Speaker, it demonstrates that when committed minds do politics seriously, serious and beneficial outcomes can be delivered for the benefit of all in our country. Whilst respecting entirely and agreeing with my right honourable friend that parties, particularly those in Northern Ireland, need the time and space to study the detail and to work out all of the implications for those in Northern Ireland, Northern Irish business wants, and the good people of Northern Ireland most certainly deserve, quick certainty. So if there are to be votes in this place on any element of the Windsor Framework as announced today, can my right honourable friend commit to ensuring that those votes take place speedily in order to ensure that certainty and peace of mind for all who either live in Northern Ireland or who wish Northern Ireland well?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend and the Chair of the Select Committee? It's a subject that he knows well and is passionate about rightly, and I thank him for all the work he and his colleagues have done over the years, which has been valuable as we have considered and concluded these negotiations. As I said earlier today, Parliament will of course have its say and there will be a vote, but we will need to do that at the appropriate time as we give people the time and space to consider the detail. But he makes an important point, and the benefit of this framework, this agreement, is that it can start providing that certainty and those benefits to the people and communities of Northern Ireland very soon. And that's why we have concluded these negotiations, and we want to start delivering those benefits for people on the ground as quickly as we can.
And David.
Can I join others in paying tribute to our late great Speaker, Betty Boothroyd? Mr. Speaker, like me, I'm sure you remember with fondness when you caught Speaker Boothroyd's eye and when she brought you to order. Can I also send our thoughts and prayers to DCI John Caldwell and his family and thank him for his courage and bravery? Mr. Speaker, like others, the Liberal Democrats will now closely study this deal, but can I welcome the spirit of partnership and compromise between the UK Government and the European Union in the formation of the Windsor Agreement? Can I ask the Prime Minister what consultation he will now undertake with all Northern Ireland's political parties, including the Alliance Party, on the Stormont break? Can he reassure us that the operation of the Stormont break will not undermine the economic stability and certainty or the political stability so desperately needed in Northern Ireland?
Thank you. I'm happy to give the right honourable gentleman the assurance that we will continue, as we have done, to engage with all parties and communities in Northern Ireland. That is the right way to proceed, particularly with regard to the operation of the break that's set out in the command paper, that we look forward to discussing that and how to codify that with the executive, the assembly and political parties as we move forward. That's something that we're very happy to do. And just so the honourable gentleman is clear, the Stormont break is based on an existing Good Friday Agreement mechanism, the petition of concern mechanism. It's well established in Northern Ireland as a cross-community safeguard. That's why we have chosen it as the appropriate mechanism for this particular purpose. But as I said, we will continue to engage with all parties to make sure that we get it absolutely right and how it works.
Julian Smith.
Speaker, can I join tributes to can I join tributes to John Caldwell, who was shot whilst loading footballs into his car, having trained kids at a football match in Omagh last week in front of his son. I welcome the Windsor Agreement and Windsor Framework and believe that today marks a critical moment in ending 3 years of instability across Northern Ireland. This has affected communities throughout this most fragile part of our country. I pay tribute to my right honourable friend and the team for all that they have done to secure this. Would you agree that we now need to give my right honourable friend, member for Lagan Valley, all the other Northern Ireland parties time and space and encouragement to restore power sharing and to ensure that political decision-making in Northern Ireland can start as soon as possible.
Prime Minister.
Can I pay tribute to my right honourable friend, my neighbour, not just for the job he did as Northern Ireland Secretary of State, but for his continued passion and devotion to the people of Northern Ireland. And can I also thank him personally for the support and advice he has given me in helping us reach the framework today. I wholeheartedly agree with him, and I hope that we can move forward with time and space to build a better future for the people of Northern Ireland. I know that that's what he wants to see. I join him in wanting to see that, and we stand ready to work with everyone to bring about that outcome.
Hilary Benn.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. Can I congratulate the negotiators on this very significant achievement? Can I also congratulate the Prime Minister on his statement in which he was so frank about the manifest failings of the original Northern Ireland Protocol, negotiated and signed by his predecessor, which made today's deal so necessary. Does he agree with me that the European Union has moved a long way in these negotiations? And does he agree that all of us in this House look forward as soon as possible to the restoration of power sharing in Northern Ireland, because that is in the best interests of the people of that part of our United Kingdom?
Minister.
Well, I thank the right honourable gentleman, and he's right. We have had constructive and good negotiations with the European Union, and I pay tribute to the President Ursula von der Leyen for the leadership and vision that she has demonstrated in trying to find a way through to help us resolve these issues. She and her team deserve enormous credit for displaying that vision, leadership and creativity, and I wholeheartedly agree with him that the people of Northern Ireland need and deserve their institutions to be up and running. I think that's something all of us in this House agree on, and all of us want to see that happen as soon as practically possible.
David Davis.
Can I start by unreservedly congratulating my right honourable friend on what seems to be a spectacular negotiating success. In the Windsor Framework, the Prime Minister has succeeded in delivering a deal which eliminates the issues of the Irish Sea border, deals with practical issues in Northern Ireland, from food to pets to plants to parcels, from medicine regulation to tax rules, but above all has introduced the extraordinary mechanism of the Stormont break. I'm unaware of any mechanism in any international agreement like the Stormont break. It seems to me a brilliant piece of negotiating insight and imagination. Could he explain to the House, because we won't all know in detail, can he explain to the House exactly how this mechanism will work and what its limitations will be?
Prime Minister.
Well, can I thank my right honourable friend for his warm words, but also tell him that it means a lot, as this is something that I know as a Brexiteer of long-standing credentials and as someone who has done the job. He knows how difficult these things are, and to have his support means a lot to me and the government, and I thank him for it. The break will work, as I said, on the basis of the petition and concern mechanism, which is a Good Friday Agreement institutional framework, which is why we believe it is the right cross-community safeguard to use. It will be applied to those good rules in Annex 2 of the protocol, which was the main cause of concern, and it's there for those rules that cause significant and lasting damage and change to the everyday ordinary lives of people in Northern Ireland. And once that emergency brake is pulled, it will give the UK government a veto. It is a very powerful cross-community safeguard mechanism that ensures sovereignty for the people of Northern Ireland, and it is part of why this agreement is the right one for the people of Northern Ireland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I be associated with the remarks about Betty Boothroyd? Can I also join with my colleagues, particularly my colleagues in Northern Ireland, sending our love and support to the Caldwell family and every single PSNI officer in uniform today standing up for our peace and democracy. Whilst we have some concerns, particularly about the Stormont break, and we will study the detail of this as we go, we are happy today that things seem to have moved. I would say, though, Mr. Speaker, there's been an awful lot of talk, particularly today and over the recent months, about the concerns of the DUP and the unionist community. It is important to remember that the majority of people in Northern Ireland oppose Brexit and do want to see the benefits of dual market access properly utilised. Will the Prime Minister agree with me that it's important now that his government support that and promote that to international investors?
Well, can I thank the honourable gentleman for his engagement with the Secretary of State and myself over recent weeks. And he is right. There is a balance to be struck, and the Good Friday Agreement is about respecting that balance, about the aspirations and identities of all communities in Northern Ireland, and that is what we have sought to achieve with the framework. And as I outlined earlier, something that I and we have heard loud and clear from businesses in Northern Ireland is that they do value their access to the single market. They do value, as all of us do, not having a hard border between the Northern Ireland and the Republic. And that is something that we have had to bear in mind as we consider these negotiations. But I believe we have struck the right balance, and the framework means that this agreement can command the support and consent from communities right across the spectrum in Northern Ireland, and I look forward to working with him and his party to deliver it.
Brandon Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I please also send my best wishes and align myself with comments from others earlier today around particularly Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell. It's a very stark reminder of the courageous and very special work that all PSI officers do every single day that they are working to keep all people in Northern Ireland safe, and we owe them all a great debt for that work. Mr. Speaker, can I just say to my right honourable friend, he's absolutely right, and I congratulate him and my colleagues on the front bench for the phenomenal focus that they are putting into ensuring that we can secure a deal that we all, I know, will hope can restore power sharing instalment, which is absolutely key for people in Northern Ireland to get back to having good governance in Northern Ireland by elected representatives in Northern Ireland. Another key area for the citizens of Northern Ireland is access to goods, as he has rightly outlined. Can he just confirm for the House today that in this deal we will not only be able to secure free flow of trade for Northern Ireland businesses to Great Britain, but also for Great British businesses into Northern Ireland? Although regulations were preventing some goods, it's great to know that the Great Yarmouth Banger will be able to get back on the supermarket shelves where required in Northern Ireland. But for many businesses, it was the administrative burden of moving from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, not just regulatory, that needed to be removed to allow them to see it as an economic benefit and therefore protect the structural integrity of the UK internal market.
Can I thank my honourable friend, but also pay tribute to him for the work that he did on this topic in his role as Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. It was invaluable in paving the way for me and my colleagues to take forward that work and bring it to a successful conclusion today. And he's right to highlight the administrative burden of moving goods from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. I'm confident that with the new Green Lane, based on using existing ordinary commercial data and data sharing in place of the bureaucratic custom arrangements that were there hitherto, it is an enormous step forward. It delivers what businesses have asked for. We've worked closely with the business community in Northern Ireland to develop it, and I'm confident as they study the detail, they will see that it provides that smooth flow of their goods around the United Kingdom as it should be, and ensures Northern Ireland's place in our UK internal market.
George Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could I welcome the fact that the document contains a number of references to the need for cross-community support, and the Prime Minister has repeated that phrase a number of times in his statement and in responses. He will be aware, Mr. Speaker, that over the last 25 years, one of the significant developments has been the number of people who identify themselves as Northern Irish, as distinct from either British or Irish. Can he give the House some indication of how he's going to gauge the opinion of that 20% of the population who identify themselves in that way, but might not necessarily be represented by a political party?
Prime Minister.
I'll just say to the honourable gentleman that my approach to this, and indeed the approach of my honourable friend the Secretary of State, is to engage with all communities, all parties, all business groups in Northern Ireland, because Northern Ireland is about balance. It's about respecting the delicate balance that exists in Northern Ireland. That was at the heart of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. And as I think he's seen, we have gone out of our way to talk and listen to everybody, respecting, of course, the particular concerns of the unionist community. But this framework, this agreement, I believe, gets that balance right. It respects the aspirations and identities of all communities in Northern Ireland, and that's why I believe it is the right way forward.
Sir William Cash.
Speaker. My right honourable friend will know that in the papers that have been published this afternoon, the devil, as ever, lies in the detail. May I seek his assurance that the government will respond to the democratically correct questions that naturally arise on the substance and procedures that are involved, and particularly on the making of EU laws and the European Court, particularly on the Joint Committee and its procedures, and, of course, the Stormont break, not to mention the whole context of sovereignty in this entire process under Section 38 of the Withdrawal Agreement Act 2020? And would he also be good enough to indicate how long a timeline he's proposing for the questions and answers that will be required and how long that might take?
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I thank my right honourable friend for the engagement that he's had with me in particular, for the advice that he has provided. Section 38 of the withdrawal agreement was a testament to him, and it reasserts the sovereignty of this Parliament and in matters of international law, and he was right to do it. I hope that we can strengthen, actually, that particular clause as we consider how best to make sure that we protect the Act of Union and Northern Ireland's place in it. But I would also say to him, in terms of questions, I'm happy to move as quickly as he's able to provide the questions for me, and look forward to engaging in that dialogue with him.
Stephen Farray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My party can give a broad welcome to this agreement. There are some positives in it that address a range of challenges that have been clear for some period of time. However, for us, the key test is the preservation of Northern Ireland's dual market access. And in that regard, my party has massive concerns around this potential Stormont break. So does the Prime Minister understand that there are real dangers that this process could add more instability into the Assembly? And can I stress to him that the petition of concern is controversial given its abuse in the past, and also create uncertainty for businesses regarding ongoing single market rules, particularly with a view to investment into Northern Ireland? So will he meet with our party to discuss this in more detail to clarify what's potentially being proposed?
Can I thank the honourable gentleman for the engagement that he and his colleagues have had with me and the Secretary of State over the recent weeks. It's been helpful, and of course I can assure him I look forward to talking to him again very soon to explain the Windsor Framework in detail. And he makes a good point. There are many people, communities, businesses in Northern Ireland that value their access to the European Union single market. They value, rightly, not having a hard border on the island of Ireland, and we have strived to protect that in this agreement whilst ensuring Northern Ireland's place in our union and protecting and safeguarding its sovereignty. I believe that the Windsor Framework does get that balance right, and I look forward to having that conversation with him.
Sir Mike Penning.
Speaker, can I say at the outset our thoughts and prayers are with the police officer who was attacked by people calling themselves the new IRA, and there's nothing new about people that are callous murderers or attempted murderers. They're still the IRA, and they always will be, like the days when I served in the province. Can I congratulate the Prime Minister on negotiating this excellent agreement? But part of the reason that the EU has moved, perhaps, was the threat of the European bill coming through this House. They clearly woke up and smelt the coffee as to how bad it was going to be for them and for the Republic of Ireland. And do you think that was part of the reason why you got such an excellent deal with the European Union?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that the bill did create the conditions for us to have the negotiation that we did, but as the government said at the time and was clear about, that its preference was always a negotiated outcome if one was available, and today we have achieved a negotiated outcome that provides the certainty and stability that we need, that resolves the issues that we set out to resolve. It safeguards Northern Ireland's sovereignty, it protects its place in the Union and guarantees and provides for the free flow of trade around the UK internal market. It's because we now have the Windsor Framework, this new agreement, that we no longer need the bill and we will no longer proceed with it, and this agreement can start bringing benefit to the people of Northern Ireland as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As Chair of the All-Party Group on Ireland and the Irish in Britain, the state of relationships between London and Dublin in the last few years has been of great concern to many of us, and the hundreds of people in this place who are of Irish or Irish origin. So we need to look to the future. We need to learn from that. And that in mind, he talks about the Good Friday Agreement in all its dimensions. That includes strands 2 and 3 that offer us great potential, if they're fully implemented, to embed some of this agreement and look to the future. Will he now commit his party and other members here join in making sure that the operation of strands 2 and 3 and our cooperation with the Irish Government goes forward in a much better sense than it has?
Prime Minister.
I tell the Honourable Lady that the Government is committed to all strands of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. I've talked a lot about balance and making sure that we get that balance right. But I would pay tribute to my Honourable Friend, the Secretary of State, and indeed my Honourable Friend, the Member for Wickham, for the incredible job that they have done, not just with the agreement, but in particular addressing the issue that she raised. And I'd also put on record my thanks to the Irish Government for the role that they have played and the support they have provided us throughout this process. We look forward to continued positive and constructive dialogue with them. That's what my colleagues and I will do as we make sure that we capitalise on all strands of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. Northern Ireland has such a precious and integral place in the United Kingdom. And it certainly seems to me, reflecting back over the last 5 years, that at any point in that time, if this deal had been on the table, those of us who are Brexiteers, those of us who are Remainers, those of us who are Unionists would have jumped on it. So I really heartily congratulate the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary, the Secretary of State and the Minister of State for their excellent work and negotiation here. But can my right honourable friend assure us that, in his view, this Windsor Agreement now fully restores the Act of Union and the Belfast Good Friday Agreement?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank my right honourable friend, particularly for her support, given her long-standing credentials in this area and the passion with which she believes in our union. I'm grateful to have her support, and I also can give her that assurance. This absolutely does meet the requirements and consistency with the Act of Union and the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, as she rightly said. We've worked very hard to get to an outcome that does, and I'm really pleased that the Windsor Framework delivers for her and everyone else in Northern Ireland.
Sammy Wilson.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the 18-minute confession which the Prime Minister undertook about the damage which the protocol which his government signed has done to Northern Ireland. But could I remind the Prime Minister that although he talks about 1,700 pages of EU law being removed from Northern Ireland, hundreds of thousands of pages will still remain. Border posts are still being planned to be built, and the Prime Minister has admitted that future EU laws will apply to Northern Ireland unless, under paragraph 52, his government decides not to proceed with law changes for the United Kingdom as a whole, or he vetoes EU proposals in the Joint Committee. Can he understand why we don't have confidence in that, and why we still fear that our position within the United Kingdom is not going to be restored by this agreement?
Mr. Speaker, I think, as the honourable gentleman knows well, the border posts are there to deal with checks in the red lane, and it's something that was always envisaged. It's always something that we said we would do. It's right that for people trying to smuggle goods into the Republic of Ireland via Northern Ireland, that shouldn't happen, and that's why those posts are there, those inspection facilities, and the investment in them is to make sure that we can do those checks properly, as we assured the European Union we would do. That's part of having a functioning green lane, is having enforcement of the red lane. To his broader point about EU law, as I said, less than 3% of EU law applies in Northern Ireland. It applies with the consent of the people of Northern Ireland. As he knows, the consent vote next year allows them to remove all of these laws and have a new approach. But it is there because, as we've heard, there is a balance to be struck. And Northern Ireland's communities, businesses do value not having a border on the island of Ireland. They do value their access to the single market. And we're at the position where we have the minimum amount of law required to fulfil that purpose. But I believe sovereignty is important. I believe those laws, as they come through, and new ones, as he mentioned, come through, should only come through with the consent and oversight of the people of Northern Ireland. And that's why the Stormont break is so powerful. It puts power in the hands of the Assembly, of him and his colleagues, to decide what's best for Northern Ireland. That's what sovereignty means to me. It means giving Stormont the ability to say no, and I hope that he will give this framework the time and consideration it deserves.
Mark Francois.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Prime Minister for his statement and also for publishing both the White Paper and the legal text on the same day, which will materially assist the whole House. As a former Chancellor, he knows well that on Budget Day, the government put a good gloss on whatever they're putting to the public. But then you have to read through the Red Book to just check on the fine detail. He's worked very hard on this, so can he assure me and the whole House that when we go through the Red Book, or in this instance the detailed legal text, we won't find any nasty surprises which would materially undermine the position of Northern Ireland in the United Kingdom?
Prime Minister. Can I thank my honourable friend for his comments, and I'm pleased that we were able to publish all the documentation. I know this was something that was important not just to him and the honourable member for Stone, but other colleagues as well. It's the right thing to do, and as I said, I want to give everybody the time and the space to consider the detail of the Windsor Framework. I believe it meets the objectives that we set out to do. It provides for the free flow of goods within the United Kingdom. It ensures Northern Ireland's place in our union, and it safeguards sovereignty for the people of Northern Ireland. I look forward to engaging with him and his colleagues over the coming days to answer his questions and provide any clarifications. And I'm confident that when he goes through the detail, he will see that this is a good agreement. It is the right agreement for Northern Ireland, for the people of Northern Ireland, and it's a way for our United Kingdom to move forward together.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I associate myself with the comments and sentiments for the families of Betty Boothroyd and DCI Caldwell. The people of Northern Ireland have been through so much. This is a very welcome opportunity to make progress, but as the Prime Minister no doubt knows, clearing up the messes that other people's make can be a never-ending job. The House of Lords is currently debating a bill that will delete over 60 areas of regulation which are not covered by the protocol. A process that the EU has already said will start a trade war if it goes through, that the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission says undermines the Good Friday Agreement. It covers issues like electrical safety and food standards and farming standards. So in order to support what he's presented to the House today, will the Prime Minister confirm that all remaining retained EU legislation will be retained in Northern Ireland itself, using the powers that he has that Stormont currently can't exercise? Because if he doesn't, how can anybody have confidence that we will avoid the regulatory divergence and that trade war that could undermine everything he's presented today?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, the rule bill and that legislation is passing separately to these arrangements. But what these arrangements do provide for is for the appropriate sovereignty in Northern Ireland, for the Stormont Assembly to have that say, more than a say, to be able to block new goods, EU goods laws as they come down the pipe if they're not happy with them. And as you'll see in the command paper, we've committed to a range of other things to ensure that we protect against trade and regulatory divergence, including dialogue with businesses in Northern Ireland, but also with the European Union. And as she studies the detail, hopefully she'll be reassured that we've protected properly against that.
Sir Ian Duncan-Smith.
Mr. Speaker, can I associate myself with my right honourable friend's comments on Betty Boothroyd, who was my first speaker when I arrived here. She'll be greatly missed, and also with the comments about the brutal attack on Peter Caldwell. Can I commend my right honourable friend for his diligence, hard work, and that of his team in pursuing this, regardless of the obstacles that lie in his way, from a reluctance of the EU to admit anything about the problems that have been taking place as a result. And can he remind him that, for me, at the end of the day, the restoration of the Good Friday Agreement, as having served in Northern Ireland myself and lost friends who didn't come back from Northern Ireland, is the #1 item that I see. But on that, I noticed when I was looking through that the Stormont break is not quite as defined as it might be, and I just wondered if he could clear this up. I see there's a phrase there that says it can only be used if there's significant impact specific to everyday life, and I wondered who makes that decision as to what marks significant. And the second point is, can the EU demand countermeasures if it is deployed by them?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for his comments and pay tribute to his service? I know this is a topic he rightly cares about. And I'm happy to clarify, it's for us to make that determination, whether the threshold has been met. It's right that there is a threshold. This is a serious mechanism, the ability to be able to block new law. It shouldn't be used for trivial reasons. It should be used for those new laws which do have a significant and lasting impact on the everyday lives of people in Northern Ireland. So that is the right trigger. It's one that we are in control of deciding. And it's equally appropriate that if we do that, that the EU will have the right to take appropriate countermeasures. That's there in black and white. Those obviously have to be proportionate. I don't think anyone could disagree with that. But this is a very powerful mechanism, and I'm pleased that we're able to reach resolution on it because, as I said, it ensures that we have restored sovereignty to the people of Northern Ireland.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
There is, of course, much to welcome in today's statement, but I must press the Prime Minister on a specific. In his statement, the Prime Minister casually mentioned the burdens on shipments between Holyhead and Dublin. He failed to mention that pre-Brexit, around 30% of all trade through the port that went on to Northern Ireland from Dublin. That trade is reorientating as we speak in real time, aggravating the already devastating impact of Brexit on the port of Holyhead. Can the Prime Minister clarify whether this new agreement will guarantee seamless trade between Northern Ireland and Wales via Dublin? And if not, will he recognise that green lanes will disadvantage Welsh ports?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, what this is about is ensuring the free flow of goods within our United Kingdom. That's what the Green Lane is there to do. It is always going to be the case after we left the European Union that sending things to the European Union from the UK would be different. And what this agreement is about is prioritising trade within the United Kingdom's internal market, and the Green Lane that we've delivered through this framework does exactly that.
Yeah. Sir John Redwood.
Who will decide which EU laws will apply in Northern Ireland, and on what basis will they make that decision?
Prime Minister.
Well, going forward, Mr. Speaker, when the executive is up and running, as I hope very much that it will be for the Assembly in Northern Ireland to decide. For those good rules in Annex 2, which are the ones of most concern, the stormwater break will apply. There will be a process of scrutiny, and using the petition of concern mechanism, that 30 MLAs from two parties can trigger the stormwater break, which then allows the UK government to veto them at that moment. So that's why this is important, because now it will be the institutions of Northern Ireland that get to make that decision.
Ian Paisley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I add my sincere comments to the attempted murder on DCI call? Well, a person who was on his family here known personally to me, and I thank the Prime Minister for the comments. And I hope that the Sovereign will in fact make a statement about the attempted murder of a police officer in Northern Ireland. I think it would be appropriate and fitting. The Prime Minister has quite rightly indicated that trade is so important to all of our United Kingdom. In paragraph 47 of the paper, it indicates in particular with regards to veterinary medicines for our animals. Our agri-food sector is huge. It feeds multiples of millions of people here in GB. Yet it says that half of all product lines are at risk, and as part of this agreement we have put in place a grace period arrangement that will expire in less than a year and a half. Prime Minister, that is utterly useless for our agricultural sector. That will actually make it more difficult for our farm businesses. Our livestock too, if we move it from County Antrim to Ayrshire, we would have to leave our livestock there if it wasn't sold in the marts in Ayrshire for at least 6 months. That has not been addressed. If the Prime Minister were to move cattle from Yorkshire to Lancashire and was told that we'd have to stay in Lancashire for 6 months, he would be not amused by that. Our farmers are not amused in Northern Ireland. It is our single largest trade. Will these issues be fixed, or is this a failed process already?
Prime Minister.
Well, I joined with the honourable gentleman in supporting our farmers, whether in Northern Ireland or indeed in Yorkshire. And actually, with veterinary medicines, the agreement we have reached, it lasts 3 years till the end of 2025, which provides us with the time and space to agree a more permanent solution with the European Union, which, as today's framework demonstrates, we are more than capable of doing, as we have resolved all the other issues that were in front of us. And I would point him to the solution that we have reached on human medicines, which I think everyone can agree are of vital importance, where we have achieved a form of dual regulation which ensures the full availability of medicines across the entire United Kingdom, with the UK regulatory authorities being the ones in charge. I think that is what he should look to, alongside all the other things that we have solved today, to have confidence that between now and 3 years in 2025 we will put a permanent footing for vet medicines on the table.
Can I warmly welcome the statement by my right honourable friend and commend him and his entire team on what they have achieved. He seems to have won some jaw-dropping concessions from the EU without giving anything in return. But can I ask him if he agrees with me that alongside the benefits this agreement will bring for the people of Northern Ireland, that it can form the basis of further cooperation with our EU friends on issues that will matter to the entire United Kingdom, so including, for example, trade and investment, science cooperation and illegal migration.
Prime Minister. Can I thank my right honourable friend for his support, but also his advice over the past few weeks as well, which has been invaluable, and I do agree with him, and he's right to highlight in particular illegal migration as well as economic cooperation. This is a priority for this government, and as we have demonstrated in the Home Secretary's work working with the French, that cooperation is yielding benefits, and we can continue to want to do more of that, and I know that he will support those efforts.
Claire Hannah.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I echo the words of solidarity from many across the House for the Caldwell family and for the PSNI, and the rejection of extremist throwbacks who the people of our region are sick and tired of. We all want to see simpler post-Brexit trading arrangements, so we sincerely welcome this progress and commend the Prime Minister on taking a much more constructive approach than his predecessors. I will reiterate that there are many political outlooks in Northern Ireland, and it is a fact that most people, most parties and most business representatives value our single market access, our high food standards and our 1998 agreement, so that we maintain the huge opportunity of the protocol. Will he commit his government to loudly championing our unique dual market access? Will he work to prevent vexatious use of the Stormont break? And will he keep a focus on restoration of the Stormont executive to allow those who genuinely believe in democracy and consensus to get back to serving the people they were elected to?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her support, and also thank her for the engagement of her and her colleagues that the Secretary of State and I have had over recent weeks. We appreciate it and will continue to do it. And I think she makes a really important point. And Northern Ireland has a unique place, not just within the United Kingdom, but within the entire continent of Europe, of having privileged access to two markets in the way that it does. And as we look forward, what we all want to see is greater prosperity, opportunity and more growth in Northern Ireland. We can build on this framework to deliver more investment and jobs. That's the prize that is available for us, and I know that my colleagues are determined to work with all businesses and parties in Northern Ireland to deliver that. But she's right, the precondition for that is a functioning executive, and we continue to work very hard to see that come about.
Dr. Liam Fox.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I congratulate my right honourable friend and his whole negotiating team, whose quiet confidence and competence has led us to an agreement which, frankly, many people would not have thought possible. And can I ask him to say something specific about the role of the First Minister and Deputy First Minister in the Joint Committee, which will be